Your brain is the powerhouse behind your life. On this podcast, we explore strategies to strengthen your connections, build resilience, and navigate life's ups and downs with a focus on brain health.
Discover how understanding and caring for your brain can transform your relationships and empower you to face any challenge with confidence.
Get ready to brain it on. Today, we're diving into the power of taking things one step at a time, celebrating tiny wins, and how this seemingly simple concept can be a game changer, especially when facing monumental challenges. This episode also includes a powerful conversation with Thomas's amazing oncology nurse, Daniel, who helped Thomas during his bone marrow transplant. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Before we get started, we have some exciting news.
Yes, we do.
We started a YouTube channel. That's right. So if you would like to see the video version of this episode, complete with all kinds of visuals from our journey, you can check out the link in the description in the show notes for our podcast listeners.
Yeah. My mother always said I had the face for radio, but we're going to give the video a chance here. See how that goes.
In all seriousness, you do look great, Thomas.
Oh, thanks. Well, that's that post-radiation glow, probably.
That could be it.
During the day, it's great because it looks like I just got back from like a tropical vacation. I got freckles and all tan.
I love your freckles, by the way.
But then at night, it makes it a little harder to sleep when you glow in the dark. So it's not as advantageous.
It has become an issue. I have to put a blanket over Thomas's face and then suffocates and all that.
It's a safety thing. We're figuring it out.
We're working on it. Pray for us. The radiation is also impacting his voice because as a result of radiation, he had to start steroids to decrease the inflammation around his brain. And this has really helped his headaches, which has been huge. But now he kind of sounds like the Godfather.
So you come to my first video recording on our YouTube channel and you insult my voice.
That was a great impression. If only you had our cat, you could be petting her.
Be perfect.
Well, should we jump into our health highlights now?
Yeah, let's do it. Health highlights.
So first off, the bone marrow biopsy came back from his bone marrow. So this is not his cerebral spinal fluid like we've talked about in the past, but from his bone marrow, it came back and it says there are no leukemia cells.
Woo!
We celebrated that.
Very good.
It was such a blessing. Oh my gosh. We celebrated with hamburgers.
As we should.
And you had a root beer float.
Oh, so good.
What's the name of the restaurant?
Little Big Burger.
Little Big Burger. Going back to the bone marrow results, we celebrated that. And then we got the more specific test later. And that is the one that tells us what percentage of the bone marrow is host versus how much is donor. And in a perfect world, it would be all donor, all Olga.
Right.
That's our donor's made-up name. So 100% lady bones. That was the target.
Yeah, that's what we're shooting for. But it seems my stem cells and Olga's have reached some sort of agreement where they're cohabitating now because when the test came back, there were 93% donor and
7% of your cells.
7% my cells.
The host cells.
Yeah, so they're still squatting in there. It's like you move into a house that the previous tenants have left, but one sticks behind and says,
one squatter
and is able to charm their way into like living in your basement or something. So we'll address the basement dweller squatter cells.
Oh, Olga, she was charmed and wooed.
I know she was charmed and wooed by my stem cells.
Well, this is probably because of radiation. So I was very concerned as I saw that 93%. I suspended judgment though, and we prayed and we said, let's wait till tomorrow. We'll let the doctor tell us what this means. And again, my chart strikes again, giving us bad news at like 10 o'clock at night.
Was it on a holiday this time too?
It was the day after President's Day. So Christmas was the cancer in the brain, cerebral spinal fluid. And then President's Day gave us some more fun news, or the day after.
Yeah.
So we're going to...
Oh, no. When's Easter?
Oh, gosh. We don't... One step at a time. That's the topic today.
Yeah. They're going to be good surprises going forward.
Yes. We're going to give it more time for the engraftment to happen, let Olga get stronger, and then they'll reassess later to see how your transplant's doing.
Yeah.
So now I would love to transition. We are going to share a conversation that we had that was incredibly meaningful to us with Thomas's oncology nurse, Daniel. He shared some really powerful insights about the importance of celebrating even the smallest of steps during a long and challenging journey like a transplant. Let's transition to that interview now.
Let's do it. Without further ado, the legend himself, Daniel, the nurse. I've always wanted to use that button.
That's good.
That's enough of that.
Here it is. All right. We have here Daniel at OHSU.
Yes.
An amazing nurse on
Thank you.
14K. Thanks for being on the show and being our very first guest to be interviewed.
It is an honor to be on the Brain It On podcast. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. And you have been so helpful for Thomas and I. You were here on Halloween. You were here the day that Thomas had his head shaved.
Yes.
A very monumental day. And you and the nursing student who was following you, really were just awesome for us. So really appreciate you guys.
Thank you. You make it easy though.
Nice. Well, thank you. So today off air, we were talking about the power of taking things one day at a time. So could you say a little bit more about that as it pertains to both patients and then also family members? How can that help them through this process?
Sure. So the transplant process is very intense, and you can be as prepared as you could possibly be, and you're still not ready for it. And so there's so much that can happen during the immediate post-transplant period, like day +1 to day +14, that it can be totally overwhelming for people, patients, and family. And
you
so,
saw some overwhelm from me
and
several
that's
times.
okay. That's totally normal, and that's okay. Yes.
Yeah.
And so I always encourage patients and family to just take it one day at a time. And I know that is very cliche, but it is the best advice that I feel like I can give to patients because, they're thinking about all these things that can happen in the future. And they're already overwhelmed with what's happening in the next 10 minutes sometimes. And so taking it one day at a time is sometimes the most important thing that you can do to help stay sane through a really, really intense process like this.
That's huge. And we talked about that earlier this morning as we were exploring what we could talk about on the show. And you mentioned that. I'm like, wow, that's really good. And then a little bit later, I'm like saying the same thing. There's some kind of issue. And you're like, remember, one day at a time.
1 day at a time.
1 hour at a time. So
Yes.
that was really helpful. You mentioned that it's kind of cliche, but I think there's such a difference, something that's being common knowledge versus common practice. So even though taking it one day at a time can seem like it's common knowledge, when it comes down to it, it's not necessarily common practice, or a lot of folks maybe struggle with that as they're hearing different things from doctors.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do you have any other thoughts that come to mind maybe for other folks, either, caregivers or the patient, either side of things? Anything else that is helpful?
Well, another cliche, but
bring it on. I love it.
They're useful, it turns out. Kind of in the same vein as taking it one day at a time is like celebrating like those little victories as they come along, no matter how small they might be, like, eating real food for the first time in a couple weeks. Like that's a really big deal. Coming off of some heavy duty pain medication, also a really big deal, and taking those opportunities to like recognize how far you've come. Yeah.
Thank you. That's awesome. And today he had some mashed potatoes.
Yes.
And we were celebrating that. So that's a very recent example that you were very happy and cheering him on for. So thanks for doing that.
Of course.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show. I really appreciate the time, and we'll see you in a few minutes for his next set of meds, probably.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks. Man, Daniel's words really resonated with us.
Yeah, so true. During the bone marrow transplant, some days were like just super, super tough. And the mucositis, which is mucositis, if you don't know, is basically the cells sloughing off the side of your mucous membrane, like in your mouth.
That was brutal.
It's very painful.
Even just eating
Yeah.
was hard. Some of our earlier episodes in the show and the podcast, we talk about some of those day-to-day challenges.
Right.
So if you listen from the beginning, or if you go back and listen now, you can hear what it was like.
Yeah.
Definitely a struggle.
You know, there were little wins along the way, though, like when I was able to eat like mashed potatoes.
We
We're
were
like,
so
oh,
stoked.
Yeah, woo. Or I was able to figure out some way to take my like 30 pills that morning with some thickened water.
It might sound simple or small, but it was
It was like that was quite the project.
it was a victory.
Yeah.
And, you know, we treated it like a victory. And
Definitely.
that's where the brain science comes in.
Yeah.
So when we acknowledge and celebrate the small victories, our brain releases dopamine, which is a good thing. It's that neurotransmitter that's associated with pleasure and motivation.
Right.
And this reinforces that positive behavior and encourage us to keep going, even when things are difficult. So this, little reward system is built into our brains, and we saw this in action all the time in the hospital. And remember how the nurses would celebrate?
Got to get that dopamine.
Remember how they would celebrate
Yeah,
your
they'd write my
improvements?
neutrophil numbers on the whiteboard. And neutrophils, we probably know by now what neutrophils are, but for anyone that doesn't, they're a type of white blood cell that fights infection. They're some of the like first responders, so to speak. They're there to neutralize the situation. Neutrophils.
Ooh.
Helps me remember it. But they'd get excited that my nurses would get excited about any small bump in my neutrophils and put it up on the board. One nurse would even draw smiley faces next to the numbers.
And exclamation marks.
Yeah, right.
Which is, the whiteboard was my love language. Whenever a nurse would change the date or write an update on the types of, treatments we were doing, I got very excited.
Yeah. That was a big deal, having, my donor cells, starting to produce blood cells like that. And the small signs of progress were huge for morale overall. Yeah.
Completely. And it serves as a great example of how you can celebrate small wins, even seemingly insignificant ones can make a big difference. So even if it's like you went up by 0.0003,
Right.
it's not just about that positive thinking. It's about leveraging how our brains work to our advantage in providing that positive feedback. So Thomas, what are some other things that have helped you get through tougher moments and kind of helped you take those small steps when it was hard?
I mean, being able to celebrate the small wins with you every day, definitely a huge cornerstone of my recovery and
Thank you.
my being able to process it in a healthy way and also keep it real. Also, having a strong support system has been crucial, though. You and your family have been amazing. Our nurses and doctors were constantly providing guidance and reassurance that we were on the road to recovery, reminding us to just take it a step at a time. And our faith has been a huge source of our strength. And so our relationship with God has been, another huge cornerstone of just being able to process and move through and hold room for big feelings while also celebrating the small wins. And then creating a positive environment. From day one, Lindsay's been awesome about decorating our hotel, or not our hotel room. It felt like a hotel room because it was so nice.
A classy hotel.
Yeah, very classy. Yeah, but our hospital rooms, you decorate it for whatever season it happened to be, whether, it was...
Pumpkins? We had pumpkins.
We had pumpkins and little fake fall leaves and stuff like that.
And then it got controversial. I brought in Christmas decorations. I think November 1st. I knew you were getting discharged mid-November, so I only had a couple weeks of Christmas decor. One of the best compliments that I got in the hospital was that I turned our room into the Hobby Lobby room. So to this day, I think that's pretty special.
That is something to
the
shoot
honor.
for. Yeah, really.
We had a few things on the walls as well, in addition to the decorative throw pillows and pumpkins. And these things on the wall were so important. And one of the biggest was a poster that said, "A journey of 1,000 miles must begin with a single step."
Yeah.
And that was huge for us. It was a constant reminder not to get overwhelmed by the big picture, but to just focus on the present moment.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And those were really cool posters. They're kind of like the motivational posters you would see like at a school computer lab or something like that.
But it's more sophisticated.
But more sophisticated. Yeah, totally. So those were great to have on the walls.
We'll link that in the show notes.
Oh, yeah.
Or the description. We'll put a link to that Amazon poster pack.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow, nice. But additional things you did every day, you'd write a new scripture on our little whiteboard in the hospital. Usually verses about how God is with us in the valley and we don't need to be afraid, and Psalm 23 type of stuff. The one that really stuck with us too is Isaiah 41:10. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. And just accepting and sitting in that, knowing that this verse is about God's presence and strength in times of trouble, made it even more powerful. And I think in the darkest times is when the light really shines the brightest.
Oh my gosh. I love that. And that reminds me of a quote that's going to be coming in a future episode from Lord of the Rings. I can't quote it to you, but in my show notes that I have, future planning, there's something to that effect.
I'm already impressed.
Thank you.
Oh, Lord of the Rings reference for like 500 points to Gryffindor for you.
I will take it. Those visual reminders and those mantras and scriptures really made a difference.
Yeah, and they really helped shift my focus and feel supported. Speaking of visuals, your dad gave you a helpful visual and analogy as you go through this cancer journey. To be as my support person, his own father had cancer. His name was also Thomas. He went by Tom.
Grandpa Tom.
Yeah, the man is a legend. I've heard about him ever since I started even dating you. He unfortunately passed away. Very devastating loss because he was such a great guy. Your dad talked about him and his colon cancer, and so your dad was able to relate, and that he has a unique understanding of what a caregiver goes through.
He was with my Grandpa Tom every step of the way. I feel a little emotional. It's really true. It's been amazing and helpful to have my dad talk to be able to call him. And there were times where, as you mentioned, not being able to hardly drink water and being at the point where you're using that pain pump. I know we kind of glossed over it, but seeing someone in that much discomfort is really challenging as a support person and as a caregiver.
I bet, yeah.
And so one of the things that my dad taught me is that this journey as a caregiver and also as a patient, I'm sure, is kind of like a roller coaster. There's ups and downs. And my dad encouraged me that kind of the sooner that you understand this, the sooner that you embrace this, the sooner you can learn to kind of go with the flow and be more mindful as you navigate this journey. And it doesn't make the bad times any easier, but it kind of helps you to not feel quite as surprised or as, devastatingly shocked when those downs inevitably come. You have good numbers, bad numbers, treatment worked, treatment didn't work, your bone marrow was fully engrafted, now it's at 93%, your engraftment failed. There's just a lot of ups and downs there. But what he told me is if you tell yourself that this is all part of it, it can help you move through the cognitive dissonance and the disappointment.
Yeah, it's about accepting the reality of the situation. And if you expect a roller coaster when you get on a roller coaster, you're not going to be quite so, surprised. So that totally makes sense to me.
But if you get on a roller coaster expecting it to be It's a Small World, both of our favorite rides on the East and West Coast.
Yes.
Not our favorite.
My favorites.
If you think it's a small world, we're going to hop on this nice water ride that's going to, have some interesting views along the side, and then we'll all sing a song that's going to stick in your mind. And then all of a sudden you reach this crazy drop. It's a shock. But if you're like, nope, I am on, what's a roller coaster? What's the one in California Adventure? I think it's called the Incredicoaster now.
Yeah, it is
but
the
if
Incredicoaster.
At some point you're going to be going upside down,
right.
It's helpful,
yeah,
right?
For sure. You see the loop-de-loop, you understand there will be a loop-de-loop.
This is going to happen.
So there are ups and downs, and in an overall war, which is what we're fighting against my cancer, there are battles that we win and lose, and that's what makes it a war. That's what makes it a fight. When we say we're fighting cancer, it's not just this cut and dry thing where they just hopefully like a treatment could just be curative right away and help out, but expecting that I'm going to be fighting this for a while and accepting that I'm in it for the long haul, it really helps.
The thing that's so beautiful about both you and my Grandpa Tom is that I think for a lot of people, going into this cancer battle, the focus could just be on how overwhelming and how daunting the treatments are. And yet both of you have, as you've gone through this, found ways to have fun and to find laughter and to make other people laugh. My dad has told me stories about how my grandpa Tom, was friends with all the nurses, and people were just enamored by how much joy and kindness and presence that he had, even wanting to make other people laugh and being concerned about their comfort. And that's exactly what you do.
Oh, well, making me blush over here.
And your mom, of course, we're going to have an interview with her later, but as she goes on her cancer battle and her journey, she's certainly paved the way. I mean, we were with her throughout her appointments, the steps that she had to take before we ever knew that you had cancer. So she's consistently been a person that we can look up to and we can cheer on.
Yeah, and she's been someone who's really modeled this for me, is that, like, you don't have to be happy about your circumstance, but you can be happy in your circumstance.
That's good.
You don't have to be overjoyed about it, but I can have joy within my circumstance.
I got to say that this quote's supposed to be at the end of the show notes, but
is it?
I'm doing it now. Okay. Brene Brown says, "It's not joy that makes us grateful. It's gratitude that makes us joyful." And I think this gratitude that we intentionally practice, it allows you and your mom and me to find joyful moments during hard times. We can laugh, and, last week you did that Mickey Mouse impersonation on our episode, which brought me so much joy. And I think we were in the middle of talking about your cancer or something really yucky and hard. So when you embrace that gratitude, that's where you can find your joy.
Yeah,
independent of circumstances.
Yeah, always finding something to be grateful for. This Ronald McDonald House, and check out that view. I don't know how many more podcasts we're going to record within this room, but we have this awesome city view behind us
for our YouTube watchers.
Yeah.
Very grateful to be
just
here.
Being grateful for that. Yeah, every day, just opening it up and just being so amazed that some family whose last name was Rude decided to invest and build this place and
collaborate with Ronald McDonald House. And here we are.
So beautiful. Yeah.
Should we put the ideas together?
Let's do it.
Putting these ideas together into practice is really important. And it can be helpful to find kind of a tangible way to acknowledge progress, which brings me to something that Thomas and I did last week as we were preparing for this episode about celebrating small wins, both in the current moment and looking back. So I think, we can talk about celebrating the fact that you went on a walk today. We always try to go on one walk, or celebrate an even bigger win that your leukemia came back as being negative in your bone marrow transplant, or your bone marrow biopsy rather. But we can also look backward, and we were inspired to create our own little Ebenezer. Can you describe what that is?
So if you're thinking Scrooge, yes.
Christmas Carol,
it
no.
Is a
That's what
we're not talking about the grumpy, Scrooge guy. So the word Ebenezer is actually like a Hebrew word, and it's meant to describe they make like a pile of rocks to commemorate where God brought them to.
So if you're going through a park and you see a pile of rocks, don't knock it over.
Yeah. And it makes so much sense to me now, because I've always gone on hikes and seen these little piles and stacks of rocks and towers, and maybe some of them are just for funsies, but surely some of those could have been Ebenezer's, though. It's a little monument to remind you of God's faithfulness. So in the Old Testament, it's kind of more of a practice at that point. But it's just a way to acknowledge and celebrate the good things, even amongst challenges.
So they would build these piles of rocks, and did each rock represent, basically a small win or something that had gone right in their lives, and each rock represented that?
Yes.
We're going to go with yes.
I'm going to go with yes.
So we were really excited about this whole Ebenezer thing. So I was like, oh my gosh, we should go down to the river. We have, which river?
Mackenzie.
All right, let's go with it.
Mackenzie River.
If that's not correct, we'll put it in the show notes.
Willamette. I bet it's Willamette.
Okay, but let me check. You are correct. Willamette.
Yeah, I had a 50-50 shot there.
So we went down to the river. We were going to, find some rocks. It's right down the street from the Rude family where we're staying. And we saw a sign, saying do not pass or something. And I don't always abide by the signs that I see as I'm walking places. But this sign was different. It said, caution, hazardous materials underground, no moving rocks. So we just started laughing and we're like, okay, so much for our rock tower.
We were so stoked to like make this little rock monument and to go down there and see. I've never seen a sign that said that. And I appreciate their honesty.
Yes.
At least there's a sign that said,
toxic chemical waste.
do not touch or move the rocks because they're contaminated.
Contaminated toxic rocks. That's a sign I've never seen before.
So it's like, oh, well, all right. Guess we're not going to do that. Like I don't need another type of cancer, I don't need you messed around with radioactive rocks or something down there.
So since we didn't have, it could have given you power though. Can you imagine?
Like the Hulk?
Opposite effect. Anyway, so since we didn't have actual rocks, we just decided to sit by the river, although a good distance away, because who knows how far that contamination could travel. But we were near the river and we reminisced kind of about all the events that had gone well to get us to this point, like even beginning with discovering your cancer.
Yeah, that was an early catch. And so that was just, one thing on the pile there.
One rock. Another one, we found a donor. And we, as our medical team, found a donor who was a match. Olga. Yes, queen.
Fraulein Olga.
We love our doctor, all the nurses like Daniel. So many rocks in our tower. And you're already on day 123.
123. Day 123.
123. You finished radiation, so we have a lot of things to celebrate.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe we'll collect some non-hazardous rocks when we get back home to Bend down at the river trail or something and make our own little Ebenezer like we wanted to.
I like it. And because you said rocks, it's time for our recap of the episode.
Oh.
The quote I was going to use about gratitude we said earlier, so
nice.
We might end up cutting that. So before we wrap up, let's recap some of the key strategies that we discussed today that can help anyone facing a journey, whether it's a medical diagnosis, cancer, it could be a relational situation, anything in your life that is a challenge, a journey that is difficult that you need to overcome. Let's give a recap along with a little bit of brain science.
Let's do a recap, Shimmer.
Number 1.
Nice. So celebrate the small wins. Acknowledge and appreciate even the small, seemingly insignificant victories. They trigger the release of dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and motivation, reinforcing positive behavior and encouraging us to keep going. It's like giving your brain a little reward. It just stimulates the reward system of your mind.
Little sticker.
It's a way to get your brain to work for you. Yeah, like a sticker chart.
Exactly. Number 2, focus on the present moment. Don't get overwhelmed by the big picture. It's tempting to look 10 steps ahead and worry about that, but instead focus where you're at. Take things one step at a time, sometimes even 1 hour at a time. Do the next right thing. Focus on what you can control now. This helps to reduce anxiety by preventing your brain from catastrophizing about the future. And it allows you to stay grounded and manage the present moment effectively. Brene Brown talks about dress rehearsing tragedy, and that's something that we do that we think is going to be a protective factor of if I just think about all the things that could go wrong, then when they do, it won't be as hard, but that steals your joy. It causes more anxiety, and it takes you away from the present, the moments that you'll never get back.
Yeah. Next was build a strong support system. So surround yourself with encouraging people who believe in you. Lean on them for support and let them remind you of your strength. Social connection is a fundamental human need. As introverted as you feel like you might be wired to be, you're still wired to have those social connections. And
they call that neurobiologically wired for connection.
You're so smart. And nice use of the word catastrophizing, by the way. I was impressed by that.
Thank you.
Yeah, anyways, back to social supports.
It's a fundamental human need.
Yeah, feeling that support releases oxytocin, which is a hormone that provides, bonding and reduces anxiety.
And finally, cultivate emotional agility. Allow yourself to feel the full spectrum of emotions, both positive and negative. Accept them, learn from them, and move forward in a way that aligns with your values. Emotional agility, as described by Susan David, is about recognizing and accepting your emotions without judgment. This allows you to process them effectively and make conscious choices about how to respond rather than being controlled by them. It's about really developing that self-awareness and understanding the link between thoughts, feelings, and actions. And because we know that we're on a roller coaster ride, unfortunately, we're not on a nice little
It's a small
smooth
world.
ride, although
Yeah.
that's not my favorite ride. Life has roller coasters.
Yeah.
It is a roller coaster at times, and embrace where you're at. Allow yourself to be scared, because life can be scary,
Yeah. It's okay to feel that.
but you have someone next to you
Yeah.
or behind you, however your roller coaster works. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Brain It On podcast. We hope this episode has inspired you to embrace the power of small steps and celebrate your own victories, no matter how small they may seem. We'd love to hear your own stories of small wins, so you can share them with us on social media if you'd like to. We live on Instagram at the Brain It On podcast.
And don't forget to check out the video version of this episode on our new YouTube channel. Woo!
Thank you so much again for listening. Time is valuable, and you invested yours in us. Thanks so much. We will be back next week with another episode.
Take care.